Welcome to our very first Summit podcast. This is the first time the Housing Community Summit has held a podcast. We just thought it would give us the opportunity to dive deep into some of the topics that really matter to delegates and everyone who's attending today. This Summit podcast is brought to you by Grit and Polish, which is a Perfect Storm production by myself. I'm the founder and CEO of Perfect Storm. My name is Amanda Leonard, and I'm joined by my founding co-host, Alison, Inman. Many of you will know Alison from her days and wide NED portfolio. She's the chair of TPAS and a well-known sector commentator, and we're certainly benefiting from a lot of that commentary today, Alison, bringing the grit to the Grit and Polish podcast in that signature Alison style. I just want to start by thanking our sponsors who have made this podcast possible for us. That is Housemarque, the UK's leading data and insight company, Boyden Executive Search and Consulting, and 3C, who are an award-winning tech, data and digital consultancy. This session now is going to talk about all things tenant engagement and tenant voice. We're joined by two great guests. Kanika Selvan is a non-exec director from Incommunities, but is also a member of the campaigning group NED Disruptors, and is an experienced senior independent director and MD of Beetroot Consulting. And she's also the chair of the EDI working group, working across many sectors in not-for-profit and for-profit organisations. We're also joined by David Kingsley, who is Tenancy Services Officer at, try saying that with your teeth in, at the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames, and a member of the G15 Residents Group and a CIH EDI board member. So welcome, David and Kanika. Alison, as the chair of TPAS, it'd be really good just to get your take on this whole subject briefly, because I know you could talk all day about this, but let's just get stuck in right at the start.
Okay, so how many hours have we got?
Yeah, you've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes,
yeah.
Excellent, that can't possibly go wrong. So we were having some conversations at TPAS recently about what do you do when you've got what you wanted? And it feels like we have spent an awful long time campaigning for proactive consumer regulation. I was in the room in 2010 as chair of the National Federation of Almos when Grant Shapps struck the match and lit the bonfire of the Quangos, and the Tenant Services Authority was one of the very first things to disappear. The sector over those 15 years had a pretty polarised view of tenant engagement. So for some organisation, it always has been hardwired into their, to use a cliche, into their DNA. That, why would you run a housing and landlord service without putting the views and experiences of the people who live in your property front and centre? That was not the case across the whole of the sector, though. And there was, a subsection of landlords for whom tenant engagement was seen as, I suppose if I have to, or nobody can tell me what I'm meant to do. And there are some organisations where it disappeared altogether. Yep. So at TPAS, we campaigned for engagement to be part of those consumer standards. And as I say, we've got what we wanted, which is, when you spend your life campaigning, actually getting what you want, it's like, God, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And now it's all about impact. So it's moving from this idea of what the art of the possible to actually demonstrate how you are listening to tenants, what you're doing with that insight and information, and actually beginning to develop a more sort of sophisticated, grown-up relationship that is based both on data, insight, lived experience.
Yeah.
Although, can I just say I hate that phrase?
Yeah.
Lived. I mean, that's all we have, unless you're dead, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
Yeah.
No, I think lived experience is one of those phrases that people use when they're trying to say a bunch of things they don't want to use the real words.
Yes.
That's an excuse.
Yeah, like a soundbite. As a sector, we love soundbites, don't we? Yeah, we're soundbite city, aren't we? Yeah.
So, like this morning, on one of these sessions, we had a long discussion about, tenant, resident, customer. You can tell by the look on my face that I am not in the customer camp. But we do waste a lot of energy sometimes talking about semantics when actually we should be talking about fix the damp and mould, for goodness sake. Look after my community, treat me with respect. So interesting times.
Very interesting. And I mean, let's just dive straight in, because that, Alison is the chair of TPAS and well-known commentator in this space. I mean, have we got what we want? What do you think, David? Let's go to you first.
I mean, yes, to an extent. It's great to see some of the great work that you've campaigned for over the years and how it kind of looks in today's landscape when it comes to resident engagement. There are a lot of initiatives within different housing associations that I'm aware of that manage to get tenant voice embedded into their practice and embedded into kind of policy change, and also as some of you may know, you have tenants on boards now, which wasn't a thing in the past. Still got a long way to go, but it's great to see kind of where we are now with that.
Yeah. And what about you, Kanika? What do you see? Because you play multiple roles, so it'd be interesting. Well, as you do, David, actually, as well. Yeah.
I think that so in my kind of NED career, one of the things that was a big kind of change for me was, the incoming consumer standards meant that actually I was chairing the customer experience committee as we did that. What does this mean for our governance change? And that was I suppose it was a very interesting journey, because it was very much about thinking about, okay, these are the things that we can see coming, this is what we're going to have to do, okay, how are we going to kind of build in customer voice, and kind of from the kind of formulaic steps of that. And I would say that journey was a healthy one, and I think now definitely I would say in communities, we definitely, I think, are at a point where the kind of richness of insights from tenants has leveled up. Would I say, I suppose the core of the question was around kind of where would I say we are now? I would say it's from a sector perspective, I'm I suppose a little happier that actually some of that has come, and that your reflection around that's not been the case in other organisations, I think, is a bit harrowing. But then I also think, I suppose, I have that view of it from a person who works with data and works in spaces where actually fundamentally, in my mind, the existence of social housing organisations is to deliver, not do we want to engage with tenants. It's actually we're here for tenants. We exist because of tenants. And I suppose I think that if I step and look into other organisations where they're delivering social value, especially to people who actually really need really good housing, especially in the kind of context that we're living in. And I would say it's time to level up significantly past, I suppose, where we have to be into actually what our, tenants, residents, customers, I'll move through them all, really need. And actually I think that externally in other sectors they are, dare I say it, I think a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think you can look both to the private sector and the wider sort of public sector to see different examples. David, that was really interesting. You say, now we've got tenants on board and we didn't used to. Actually, it's such a strange sector that goes in cycles.
Yeah.
So tenants on boards was absolute business as usual.
Then austerity came.
Yeah, and then suddenly, we don't need any tenants on, within that governance sector, and it sort of fell by the wayside a little bit. So with in some organisations, the regulator does not say that there should be tenants on boards. There are a lot of organisations where there aren't. I question how you can say that tenants are genuinely exerting power, influence, whatever, if the most powerful part of your organisation does not have that kind of representation. That's not to say, obviously, that tenants are, tenants on boards are not there to represent the rest of the tenants.
No.
Any more than, accountants on the board are there to represent every accountant that has ever walked the earth. So I think it's a bit nuanced.
So that's actually an interesting, because that's more almost about boards, isn't it, and board composition, because everybody on a board is responsible for the organisation's strategy, mission, governance, delivery. So the accountant on the board is just as responsible for tenant voice, isn't it, as the tenant on the board.
Yeah.
I don't know, what have you seen, Kanika, in terms of kind of representation on boards, and not just the tenants, the kind of the wider...
Yeah, I mean, the campaign that I'm part of around kind of NED disruptors is about, what could boards, more broadly, not just in social housing, really look like if we reimagined them. And I think, that challenge of, one or two lone residents holding the voice of everybody. I mean, if you ask me if I represent all, mixed race people in Manchester, the answer is no. Nor do I represent every, woman that exists. Or exactly, I don't, and I wouldn't want that burden. And there's a degree to which it's a little bit the same with just the idea of going, well, having that presence is the answer alone. I would say, the conversation we've been having from a NED disruptors perspective is about how could you change the way that boards make decisions? How could you change the dynamic of boards? How could you recognise the power dynamic within boards? And what of the things that we do are performative, what are the things that we do that are actually core to the governance and the controls? And I think unpicking some of that, to me, is the way in which actually you could get yourself into a space where, A, if you've got an insights report, you're actually responding to it because you want to hear it. B, that your debate is different. So if a tenant is on there, they can actually speak.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the core bit, which is about, particularly when thinking about boards and representation, is that the really easy conversation is how do you put someone on it? How do you put someone on a board? How do you, get more diversity? What could that bring? That's easy, recruiting. The hard bit is going, how can we make it so that people can actually have a really good discussion that isn't actually if we're really being to the point about it, there's some weird subtleties in boards where I just think, I don't even know what that person said. Yeah. Or that person's agreeing with that person. Or that cultural dynamic, it shuts down conversation.
Yeah. And I think that, and I want you to come in a minute, David, to just tell us about the whole kind of G15 experience and, what's on that agenda in your meetings. But I just want to just touch on that point, because all board members, whether they're tenants or board members or committee members, whatever, need to be equipped with the right skills to tackle what boards have to tackle, don't they? I mean, I've got an example at the moment that I'll be discussing at a committee with Alison coming soon this week. Actually, it's a committee that Alison happens to chair, but we've asked for tenants' support with a really complex piece of work. And if we don't equip them with the knowledge to handle that complex piece of work, their contribution will be less valid to us. Their contribution will be treated more as almost, oh yes, we have consulted. And for them, they'll be very frustrated because they may be asking for things that we can't deliver.
So I sometimes think, if I wandered into Liverpool Street Station in the rush hour and said, oi, I'm looking for a chief executive for a housing association.
Are you free?
You'll do. And then we put that person in charge and wondered why, it didn't work. That's what we do with engagement and involvement sometimes. We do not
plonk people in.
And we also have, at its worst, I think we value some skills and experience far more highly than others. And that's often, for many years, people with... there was a narrative in the sector that said, well, we don't really need anyone with any housing experience, but we do want to talk to people who know about AI or whatever. And it's just like, if you were running a bank, would you actually say what we are looking for is people who know absolutely nothing about banking? That would be bonkers.
Just coming on then to so David, that's kind of, we'll expand that sort of G15 question then. So I mean, have you been kind of given training to fulfil your role on the G15 Residents Group, and your role as on the EDI board with CIH? I mean, do you feel equipped to do the things you're doing?
Yeah, I do to some extent. We have the option of getting additional training in kind of understanding policy and governance, which is great for those who are new to it. It's something that I've been working in.
Your day job, of course.
Day job in the past couple of years. So it's been a slow and steady transition into it. But there are some residents who, for example, it's new to them, and they are given the opportunity to upskill themselves. There are various kind of CPD opportunities and kind of signposting to other organisations that provide this training to upskill residents. And again, most residents are working different day jobs in different sectors and not necessarily in housing. I have the privilege of being a frontline housing practitioner as well as being an involved resident. So I have that kind of insight from my day job as well.
Yeah, which is a good balance. Were you going to come in, Kanika?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's something interesting about the thought about training. Just allow me to be radical and challenging.
Go.
Which is to say, I think that sometimes we revert to going to get a board so that it works. What we need to do is train people with, I don't mind lived experience, of being a minority to fit this space. And I think it's a default, actually, it's a little problematic. And the reason why I think so is because I think if we're talking about just resident engagement, like we would with any sector, you go, tell us your experience. That's what you want. Not solve the problem for us. Tell us the experience, because specialists solve problems. Tech people will solve the problem. I'll solution it for you. Or in housing, I'll solution it for you. But you wouldn't go solve us the problem if it's about my iPhone. You go, what's your experience of an iPhone? And then that's the richness of the conversation. When we're talking about boards, from that perspective, we're thinking about getting boards to be really effective with different people with different experiences. We shouldn't be thinking the same way we're thinking about it when it comes to engagement. We should be thinking about it from the perspective of going, what's the conversation we want to have? And actually the conversation often we really want to have is not a conversation that might exclude, or where we have to train people to understand, for instance, the nuances of an arena that actually doesn't need to be nuanced. And that's, I suppose, the bit about sometimes when we result to kind of go and we need to train people to be in this space. I think that the bit around we need to train people, let's be real. You've got a housing background. You're probably pretty good at, understanding a lot of it. But there's a lot of really bright, clever people who are residents who know a whole bunch of things. And actually, we don't need to train them to be in the space because they're probably doing professional jobs. What we probably need to do is go, what barriers have we put into boards that actually have made it so that these people can't just come in and have a normal conversation? I think that's the really big bit.
I think that's really interesting. One of the things that I spend time thinking about is actually how do we train the accountant, the lawyer, the tech geek, the whatever else we've got sitting, the treasury management specialist. They're the ones in it often come from out of sector, don't understand, and often bring a set of assumptions around the people who live in social housing, which is formed by, your criminologist, your sociology background, what is it that forms ideas of who a group of people might be,
and that bias,
and what bias are we seeing in the media, and then, there is a public discourse that, over the past 20, 30 years has seen living in social housing as suboptimal. When I was young, it was like, a golden ticket. It was aspirational to live in social housing, and there's a wider discourse that says the absolute opposite. And it's about agreeing what your shared, what's the shared objective of these group of people, whether that's your scrutiny panel or your board or your exec team or whatever.
And there's so much power, I think, it's so important, that role of the chair within that. I mean, I think we undervalue how much the emotional intelligence, nuance, understanding of where each, maybe it's in a board or a committee or whatever, how much they have to manage not just a conversation but that journey maybe for them. I mean, I've never met anyone who's an accountant who landed in social finance, in social housing, who had those types of things. But I suppose I my experiences in a specific area, in a specific geography. But I can well imagine that their journey of understanding the sector and the organisation is a big one.
And it's not people who have got, terrible attitudes. It's just these, the way we view each other is conditioned by our experiences.
Yeah,
and,
100%.
you know, as I say, you're the sociologist,
Yeah,
David.
yeah, that's...
And
You've got
you're
some theories for us.
yeah, come on, let's hear them. Yeah,
None
yeah.
off the top of my head.
I've got some GCSE sociology.
We might have to revert to that then.
I know, yeah, we'll leave that out. Yeah.
But I think one of the best, over the last couple of years, we have begun to see a centering of operations, or what broadly you could call, housing operations, within the discourse of organisations, that has opened up the desire to hear more from the people who live in the homes that we own and manage.
Yeah.
And that is you can draw a direct line from Grenfell to where we are now, and the fact it's a tragedy that 72 people had to die and a whole community be disrupted in order to get us to where we are. But I think it's incumbent upon us to continue those conversations and make them as rich as possible.
With courage, I think that is one of the big things that I think, courage and ambition, as a sector, I think. And that, I've heard the stories of the kind of golden years of, we used to all be advocates and we used to all be, whether that was the case, at that point or not is kind of, a different thing. But that idea of having an ambition for what we could really be as a social housing sector and an ambition for how we could make things really different, and, that feels like there's some momentum around that. And as you say, you don't want it to come from tragedy, but sometimes it does.
Yeah. And I think you've got to also appreciate the kind of the context of the tenant organisation relationship. I think, and I still see this now, but it's definitely getting better. I couldn't get when I moved into this sector, which is quite a few years ago now, but I just couldn't get this whole kind of tennis match between tenant organisation, and so adversarial. I kind of understand a lot more of the context around that now. I get why it was like that. It was born out of lack of trust and frustration. But I think, we've got to start aligning and working together to really get that right. And I think we've made some strides. From your perspective, David, what are you discussing around your G15 Residents Group, for example? What are the thorny issues you're really getting underneath?
So at the moment we're writing a piece regarding the rent convergence.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else.
Have you got a percentage yet? We've had all sorts on here this morning, haven't we, Alison?
No, I haven't actually.
Yeah. Oh no, okay, right. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Yeah.
That's kind of one of the main things that's going on at the moment, and also we're kind of conducting a piece with Peabody to go out print for antisocial behaviour.
Right.
So for both for residents and for practitioners who face it in their day-to-day roles, and just that thing around the practitioners fortunate enough to be able to go home at the end of the day, but residents still have to live in those environments after, and then obviously get the brunt of it. The practitioners get the brunt of it after from the residents when they're fed up. So yeah.
So really aligning that, people doing the jobs in communities. And I think, it'll be an interesting one, put you on the spot now. How often when you're out in communities, do you go out on a Saturday night, or do you go out on a busy bank holiday weekend? Or are you and the teams out and about doing that?
No, actually not. So as in within my actual role itself? No, so I'm a Monday to Friday.
Oh, okay.
So I don't really go out on the weekend.
Yeah.
And but in terms of kind of like my housing head, I do spot the issues that are available, that are present, some antisocial behaviour, vandalism, that sort of stuff, etc. Kind of like pings off in my head.
Yeah, because you're wearing those. Because exactly. I think again that's another thing. I think it's really hard, isn't it, to if you haven't felt a community and felt the area 24/7, it can be quite hard, can't it?
Yeah, and one of the things I sometimes say to sort of up and coming, the young housing professionals who are doing that front-facing role is, where do you go? Where do you go when it feels a bit like something might be bubbling under on your estate? Who is it you go and talk to?
Yeah.
And they say, what do you mean?
Well, let's ask. Yeah. Who is it?
But they tend not to do. That we have. So the role of a facing, customer facing housing professional has become codified over the 40 years that, since I worked for the local authority, where basically the role of a housing officer was pretty fluid, with parameters that you did not cross. Whereas now we have processes and procedures for everything, and that time just to understand your community, when lots of things are curated through the customer contact centre or whatever, it changes the relationship. And from where we work, Amanda, that one of the questions you see most commonly on a Facebook page would be, who is my housing officer?
Yeah.
There's something interesting about, I suppose, your role, especially thinking about the kind of step change that we've got in some of the tenant satisfaction measures. It's interesting, that bit around getting to know your own neighbourhood and community, and then thinking about how in the future human connection is human connection, right? You've got to know people, you've got to understand what the vibe check is, and that's place-based and personal. But then there's this other bit about that growing commitment to kind of data and online and social media, because actually there's a lot of people who, if I think about how much I'm stood on the street how much I'm in my house on my computer,
on your phone,
or on my exactly. And I don't like going on my personal Facebook group for my area, but I know the WhatsApp pops off. So there's something about those different spaces that where the community now lives that are so key. But do you think that you think that the bit around the I'm not taking over.
No, that's good.
Sorry.
That's good. It's a conversation. You go. We're going for a lie down. You guys are younger than us. We're going for a lie down in a minute, aren't we, Alison?
Do you think that the kind of step change will be that it will be more about what's the social media stuff telling us, what's the and then the human? Is it a combo?
I think it'll be a combo. Recently in my role, there was a fire that took place. Something along the lines of a freeholder next to a council tenant. The freeholder had the fire in their property, and a lot of the social housing residents on the road, on the estate, were taking to Facebook and posting about it. So it's a bit difficult for the council to kind of penalise the freeholder because they're not our tenant. But you did find a lot of, obviously I had to go and kind of visit our tenant and kind of console them a little bit, and kind of do some kind of fact finding. And then they showed me what had happened, because again I asked them for some evidence, said, oh no, it's all over Facebook, have a look. And you find that a lot of the community had come out to speak about this particular tenant who is causing a nuisance in their neighbourhood. So you do find that that social media piece is there, where sometimes kind of direct channels to like local council may kind of be, worthless as such, but kind of take you to a dead end as such. So it's easy to maybe
way of communicating.
Exactly.
And people are people,
Yeah, of course they are. They're not defined by tenure, are they?
No, water, will find anyone who's tried to diagnose a leak knows that it'll just find the place, and then that's where it is. And if I think our services are not accessible yet as a sector in the way that people want to access them. So most of the people who live in our properties are at work, often in the kind of work that means you're driving a van or you're working in a care home, or the kind of occupations where you are not in charge of your own time. So the time that you have got is in the evening. Can't speak to a living, breathing person.
And then we're operating 9 to 5.
We operate in 9 to 5.
Same with repairs as well.
Don't get us started on that. We'll be here all night.
But there's things like, I was talking to someone on the tenant from a neighbouring housing association who said, I've had this repair done. They could only do half of it, and that's absolutely understandable. But the bloke turned around and said, it's all right, I'll come back tomorrow morning, first thing. And she's like, I've taken today off work.
I can't have another day off.
I can't take another
Even
day off.
Even the assumption's irritating. Wind me right up.
All
right, you think I just sit here all day?
Waiting for you
exactly. Would love to have you come back tomorrow because I ain't got anything else to do.
But I do think, although you were saying, Alison, about we've got better processes now and things are embedded, I think what you were describing, David, is doing the right thing. Using your common sense, looking at all the available information, touching it, feeling it, not just taking the information you've been given and making that call. I still think culturally we've got quite a long way to go in that regard.
I think the step change, I think that to me, what you were implying was this bit around meeting people where they're engaging already.
Yeah.
How can we get there?
Yeah, don't drag them into us.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they're on Facebook, we're on Facebook first. We can see when it's happening, which also means we can have the conversation with an informed way.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, one of our members of staff at TPAS, the piece of consultancy to work within a particular locality to find a scrutiny panel. So to do a recruitment for a landlord, and one amazing woman called Kate Newbolt, and she stood outside the co-op for a week.
And I bet she talked to more people.
And she talked to more people about who might be interested in who does what and what. I always say to people, go to the school gate. That's where people are. They're not going. But we still have. Meetings.
They're not coming to you.
They're not coming.
Come to our office and attend sit and
give up your time.
It's funny though, because I mean about 10 years ago I was involved in the biggest piece of customer research ever in the food travel sector, and we were looking at all of this data and all this information and going, people aren't staying long enough in restaurants and we need to serve them quicker and we need to do all of this, and we couldn't work out why people weren't staying long enough. And so all we did was we took all of the data, of course, to inform a point of decision, but then we went and stood on a busy weekend and on a weekday and we watched how people behaved, and everybody left to run to the nearest flight information board to look up and check when their flight was leaving. So do you know what we did? We put flight information boards in the restaurants. People spent more money, they were more relaxed, they were less stressed on their journey. But if we hadn't have gone and stood at that busy airport and actually observed that, we might not have made that call. And it is the same principle, isn't it, we're talking about?
But also, I'm so much more relaxed in restaurants and airports when those boards are in there. If that was you,
That's
I'm
me.
very, very grateful. Honestly, super grateful.
Not single-handedly. I did work for a large company, but
But meet people where they are.
Yeah, meet people where they are.
And
absolutely.
be genuinely interested. Everybody has a story. I've said this to you before, but a wonderful man called Tim Morton, who spent his entire career in engagement, once said, if I didn't work in tenant engagement, I would never have met a man who liberated Belson. Okay? We are all people, we are all only
Everybody's
people.
got a story.
Everybody's got a story, everyone's got a struggle. And just because some of us sit here and some of us sit there, it doesn't mean that, we shouldn't be having those conversations.
I also think there's that thing about when someone engages with us and gives us their information, there's that thing about it, or their experience. It's like it's such a gift. So you almost have to do all the legwork to go, if you spend that time with me, I'm just so blessed because I now know something I didn't know. So if I can make it the easiest I can, what are the things that I can do? Can I already be there? And actually, the best case scenario is you have a relationship, so they want to tell you. But actually, it's an amazing thing if someone chooses to do so and gives up their time and their thought.
And do you think, just on that point, David, do you think we're joining the dots enough between those sources of information? Because we actually engage with our tenants quite a lot, but the feedback I hear is it goes into the kind of the universe, and then we don't join the dots, unless a formal complaint's raised or a repair's raised, what do we do with that really rich intel that loads of different people are picking up every single day? Do you think we're cracking that now, or still not?
I still feel like we've got a long way to go when it comes to kind of gathering kind of tenant information and then actually actioning it. I mean, you get a lot of it when it comes to, again, some of the engagement boards, engagement panels, resident panels and whatnot, etc. But you get a lot of residents who have a lot of views who just aren't heard or are so let down by housing associations or like registered landlords, where it's to the point where it's just like, I can't bother anymore. I've done this so many times. So again, it just depends on who's in charge of that information and what they're planning on doing with it, and making sure that the residents can see kind of like the end goal
Yeah.
of what it is
Yeah.
that they're trying to achieve, rather
Yeah.
than just being a tick box exercise of, oh, we wanted to speak to this many residents and then to get this action and then
Yeah.
nothing for 6 months
Yeah.
after.
The handoff and
Yeah.
right. One final point each, and I'll allow Alison to have one as well, given it's her thing. Yeah, even though she's the co-host. So, and I'll come to you last, Alison, just to wrap up. Where are we feeling? You know, how are we feeling on a scale of kind of optimism, pessimism? Where do we feel we are on that continuum?
I'm somewhat optimistic, I'd say.
Okay, good.
I've only been involved in the past few years, and I've seen it kind of get a lot better.
Yeah.
When it comes to kind of resident engagement and actually listening to tenants. I've had the opportunity myself as an involved resident to speak at the last Inside Housing conference. I spoke about my own experience, and my housing association were more than happy for me to share the fact that I didn't
Right.
have hot water and heating for 2 months,
Right.
rating on repairs.
And great that your
Yeah.
organisation were happy for you to share that
they're
as well.
happy.
Hurrah,
And it's something that, again, most residents after having something like that would just be like, I don't want to get involved again. I don't want to have anything to do with the housing association. But I still persevered through. Has managed to
Good.
get it sorted out, and I have now a case study, as they call it, or like a personal story,
Yeah.
a lived experience.
Yeah.
To kind of share and show that despite, like, again, these things do happen, service failures do happen, but again, it's that what are you doing after
Yeah.
to support that resident to help them and also keep them engaged as well.
Yeah.
Because if it was somebody else, they may not want to be engaged after.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. So building that advocacy from service failure, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. What about you, Kanika? Where are you kind of on that continuum?
Yeah, optimistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's driving your optimism? What's making you feel?
I think the years of campaigning. I feel like
Yeah.
I've not done the years of campaigning, but I've seen the impact and lived through some of that in an organisation where I feel like I've seen them really take it seriously, and really work hard at going, how would we, kind of do customer voice, understanding that in a way that feels like a step change in the organisation. Then I've seen the change programmes pop up, and I've seen I've seen it feel different. I suppose the bit around the caveat, not really the caveat, I suppose the bit that's probably the added bit would be, I think that the sector is probably behind still quite considerably when it comes to kind of, I suppose, customer tenant resident expectations. I feel this real tension about young people landing.
Yeah.
And that they're going to revolutionise a lot. They're going to revolutionise workplaces as well as what we need. And then there's also the external pressures that I think mean that there's almost a kind of the next big jump. I think you need to get your campaigning on again and work out, because there's
What's
something
next,
to me about that's big. That's a big one with the pressures that our residents have got if we think about who they are and what they've got to deal with. Yeah. So I think optimistic, but also kind of
rest on our laurels almost,
really ambitious.
Yeah.
Really ambitious for more.
And Alison, final word.
One of the things I'm thinking about at the moment is how do we get our heads around a workforce, and there's young people come into the sector. The housing crisis is so deep that they are more likely than not to be precariously housed themselves. So how do we foster, develop, encourage genuine sort of empathy and whatever else you want to call it, when the member of staff is living in a house share that they can be kicked out of at a moment's notice, and they are paying 3 times as much as maybe one of the people who's got lifetime tenure.
Yeah.
I think I think there are real implications for engagement. I'm really hoping we get our heads around informal engagement. That's where the richness is. And that as organisations we step back from always trying to curate. We want to be, a lot of organisations want to be in control of the narrative. That ship has sailed, and it is never coming back. There are too many different ways of...
And that's the social media tension, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want to control it.
And we're rubbish at it.
Yeah.
And accept it, embrace it, and be better at it. But I'm optimistic. But we can always be better.
Yeah. So it feels like we've got that backdrop of optimism, but we know we've still got a lot to do to get it delivered, haven't we?
I'm more optimistic now. She said she's optimistic.
Yeah.
Just because of your role, do you know what I mean? I just think,
yeah,
oh,
like a bit of a yardstick thing.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Are we optimistic? Let me just check.
Oh yeah, Alison's optimistic, so we're optimistic.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
No, that's good. Yeah, no, thank
But
you.
also I'm
Yeah.
optimistic because,
Yeah.
you know, I'm 60 odd. You two are not 60 odd. You've got 30 years on me
Yeah.
probably. And, you know, if we ignite the passion in your generation, I can go and have a lie down.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That sounds
Optimistic about a rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, optimistic about a rest. Yeah, you can come and mark up the homework, can't you? Yeah,
Just be grateful that, you know,
Yeah.
we've got a new generation
yeah,
coming who
a passionate
Yeah.
advocate.
But I
We're
hear the
so
ones
lucky.
after us are even more radical.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? I
they're
think
just scary.
Yeah, they're really scary.
I
We
say
didn't dare
nothing.
invite them.
I employ a couple of them. I'm going to show up.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much, both of you, to Kanika and David. That was a brilliant conversation, and I'm sure people will enjoy listening to your thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.